A billionaire CEO receives a hospital bill for a little boy's heart surgery, with a note that simply says, "I never meant for you to find out like this." He sighs, thinking it's a money grab, only for his jaw to hit the floor at the photo attached. Before we begin, let us know in the comments where you're watching us from, and please like this video to support the channel. Now sit back, relax, and enjoy the story. Chris Callahan drummed his fingers against the smooth walnut surface of his desk, eyes skimming over yet another quarterly report. Numbers blurred together, profits up, stocks stable, no surprises. He leaned back, rolling his neck, and glanced at the stack of paperwork waiting for his signature. His assistant, Sam, slipped into the office with her usual efficiency, a fresh pile of documents balanced in one hand and a single envelope in the other. "More bad news?" Chris asked dryly. "Just the usual," Sam replied, placing the stack in front of him. She hesitated with the envelope. "This came in the mail. No return address." Chris frowned. "Fan mail? Death threat? Credit card offer? Could be all three," Sam deadpanned. He huffed a laugh, slicing the envelope open with his letter opener. A folded sheet of paper slid out along with a photograph. Chris unfolded the paper first. At the top, the words Westwood Children's Hospital were printed in neat, professional lettering. Below, a list of charges added up to a number that made even him blink. $203,567.42. Then he saw the note, written in uneven handwriting. "I never meant for you to find out like this." Chris scoffed, the corners of his mouth twisting. "That's a new one," he muttered. "Usually, they go for the 'I just want what's fair' angle." Sam raised an eyebrow. "Scam? Obviously," Chris snorted, tossing the paper onto the desk. "You'd think they'd at least try to make it believable. A kid in the hospital? What's next, a puppy in a well?" He moved to slide the paper aside, but the photograph caught his eye. A little boy, maybe 6 or 7, pale and thin under hospital sheets. His hair was a shade too dark to be blonde and too light to be brown, falling messily over his forehead. In one arm, he clutched a battered teddy bear, its left ear hanging by a few loose stitches. Chris's hand stilled. The boy's eyes stared back, gray and stormy, painfully familiar. His chest tightened unexpectedly. "Cute kid," he said gruffly, trying to ignore the way his pulse had picked up. "Definitely a scam, though. They must have pulled some stock photo off the internet." Sam glanced at the picture, then at Chris, expression carefully neutral. "Right. Stock photo. Sure. Don't start," Chris warned, but the words came out weaker than he intended. He tossed the picture down like it burned. "Send it to legal. Have them shut it down." Sam tapped her fingers against the desk thoughtfully. "We could set up a My Long Lost Kids fund," she mused. "Every 5th kid gets a free college scholarship." Chris snorted, some of the tension slipping. "Might need a punch card for that." Sam cracked a rare smile. "I'll get on it." She slipped out, leaving Chris alone with the bill, the note, and the photograph. He glared at them, willing them to vanish. After a minute, he swiped the papers into his bottom drawer and slammed it shut. Out of sight, out of mind. He turned back to his computer, tapping aggressively at the keys. Emails, reports, spreadsheets, anything to bury the unease still prickling under his skin. But the boy's eyes lingered, gray and uncertain. The way his small hand gripped that teddy bear, knuckles white even in sleep. Chris pinched the bridge of his nose and groaned. He'd seen enough of these scams to last a lifetime. Women claiming alimony for kids that weren't his, charity letters promising to name a wing in his honor. This was just another con artist looking for a payday. Except for those eyes. He cursed under his breath and pulled open the drawer, snatching up the photograph again. It felt heavier this time. He stared at it for a long moment, tapping the edge of it against his desk. "I'm really doing this," he muttered, already hating himself for it. His phone buzzed. He picked it up, stabbing at the screen. "Get the car," he barked at Sam. She hesitated. I take it you're not sending this to legal? No. He gritted his teeth. I'll handle it personally. Should I prep the jet? Chris rolled his eyes. It's a hospital, not a hostile takeover. Noted. There was a pause. Should I make a doctor's appointment too, just in case? He bit back a laugh. I hate you. Join the club. Sam replied cheerfully and hung up. Shoving the picture back into his pocket, Chris grabbed his coat and stalked out. It was a scam, had to be. But if nothing else, he'd shut it down quickly and go back to pretending he didn't feel that sharp twist in his chest at the thought of a little boy alone in a hospital bed. The elevator doors slid shut, and Chris leaned back, eyes closed. He pressed a hand to his chest, exhaling slowly. It didn't help. He didn't know why he was doing this, just that he couldn't not do it. And if it turned out to be some elaborate con, he'd make sure whoever was behind it regretted wasting his time. But for now, he couldn't stop seeing those gray eyes. Chris's driver pulled up to the hospital entrance, the engine barely off before Chris swung the door open and stepped out. The building loomed above him, all glass and concrete and too many windows. He adjusted his cufflinks, straightened his coat, and ignored the tightening in his chest. This was a waste of time, he reminded himself. A formality. Nothing more. Inside, the smell of antiseptic hit him immediately, sharp and clean. Nurses rushed past, clipboards clutched and sneakers squeaking against linoleum. Chris's steps slowed. Hospitals weren't unfamiliar to him, but it had been years since he'd set foot in one. He blamed the prickle of unease on the lighting, too bright, too sterile. A nurse glanced his way, then did a double take, eyes wide behind her glasses. Dr. Evans? She asked, voice hairy but hopeful. Cardiology's down the hall, but I need you in dash. Not a doctor. Chris cut in, holding up a hand. The nurse blinked, flustered. Oh. Sorry, you look. She shook her head, cheeks pink. Never mind. Are you here for someone? Chris pulled the crumpled photograph from his pocket, smoothing it between his fingers. Room 314, he said. Liam Parker. The nurse's face softened. Right. Poor kid. 3rd floor, East Wing. Mom's with him. Thanks, he muttered, already moving. He jammed the photo back into his pocket, feeling the edges press through the fabric. The elevator ride was slow, humming softly underfoot. Chris's reflection stared back at him from the polished doors, tie a little crooked, jaw set. His hand wouldn't stop twitching, so he jammed it into his coat pocket. It didn't help. Room 314 was at the end of a quiet hallway. The door was half open, soft voices filtering out. Chris paused just outside, one hand resting on the frame, suddenly unable to move. He could hear beeping, steady, rhythmic. Monitors, probably. He tried to muster the annoyance he'd felt earlier, but it slipped away, replaced by something raw and unfamiliar. He forced himself forward, nudging the door open with his shoulder. The woman sitting beside the hospital bed looked up sharply. Her hair was pulled back, dark strands escaping to frame her face. Shadows lay heavy beneath her eyes, but her gaze was steady, piercing, protective. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then her eyes narrowed. You, she bit out. Me, Chris agreed dryly. He closed the door behind him, the click unnaturally loud. Sienna Parker stood, one hand curling into the blankets draped over the bed. What are you doing here? Thought I'd check out the latest scam in person, Chris replied, sliding his hands into his pockets. Nice setup, by the way. Very convincing. Sienna's jaw tightened. This isn't a scam. No? Then you're saying he's really? He trailed off, nodding toward the bed. Liam lay among a mess of blankets, small and too still, cheeks pale except for 2 faint splotches of pink. Tubes ran from his arm, monitors blinked softly at his side. Chris's throat felt dry. Believe what you want, Sienna snapped. But keep your voice down. He's sleeping. Chris snorted, but it came out weaker than he'd intended. Right. Wouldn't want to disturb him. Sienna's eyes flashed. If you're just here to throw money around and make yourself feel better, don't bother. Chris arched a brow. You think I flew here just to write a check? Wouldn't put it past you. Sienna muttered, arms crossing. Charming, he said flatly. Look, let's settle this quickly. DNA test. Sienna's mouth twisted. Excuse me? DNA test, Chris repeated. Simple, quick, and clears this up without the dramatics. Sienna's fingers clenched the bed rail, knuckles white. For a moment, she seemed ready to throw him out herself. Then the tension drained from her shoulders, replaced by exhaustion. Fine, she snapped. If that's what it takes to get you out of here. Perfect, Chris said, aiming for smug and landing closer to relief. A soft murmur broke the silence. Sienna turned instantly, her glare melting as she leaned over the bed. Hey, sweetheart, she whispered, voice gentle. Liam's eyes fluttered open, unfocused at first. Then he blinked, gaze landing on Chris with surprising clarity. His fingers shifted, clutching the teddy bear tighter. Chris cleared his throat. Hey, kid, he managed. It came out gruffer than he'd meant. Liam stared, blinking slowly. Are you the doctor? Chris hesitated. Not exactly. Good, Liam mumbled. Doctors are boring. Sienna snorted softly despite herself. Chris's lips twitched. Can't argue with that, he said. Liam's eyes drifted shut again, exhaustion dragging him back under. Sienna brushed a hand over his hair, movements careful and tender. Chris looked away, throat tight. Happy now? Sienna whispered harshly, voice barely carrying. Satisfied it's all real? Chris swallowed, jaw clenching. We'll see, he muttered. Once the results come in. She huffed, shaking her head. Unbelievable. Comes with the job. He shot back, but there was no heat behind it. A doctor slipped in, glancing between them with raised brows. Should I come back? No, Sienna sighed, pinching the bridge of her nose. He was just leaving. Chris opened his mouth, ready to argue, but Liam stirred again, small fingers reaching out. Wait, Liam mumbled, eyes still half closed. Chris froze, every nerve drawn tight. Liam's fingers curled around the edge of the blanket, voice small and cracked. Are you my dad? The words hung in the air, quiet but unshakable. Chris couldn't move, couldn't speak. He stared at the boy too thin, too tired, and for the first time in years, his mind went completely blank. Chris's hands trembled as he read the paper, the black and white certainty of it blurring at the edges. 99.9%. He dragged in a breath, but it got stuck somewhere between his chest and throat, leaving him feeling raw and exposed. He had barely stepped into his office when the courier handed him the envelope. Less than 48 hours since the swab, and already the results were in, neatly typed and irrefutable. The pristine, clinical words paternal match confirmed stared back at him, offering no room for debate. He sank into his chair, the leather creaking beneath him, and pinched the bridge of his nose. It didn't help. That small, cracked voice in the hospital room echoed in his ears, "Are you my dad?" Chris exhaled shakily, tossing the paper onto his desk. It fluttered once, landing beside the photograph he hadn't been able to throw away. Liam's face, pale and hopeful, stared back at him. For a moment, Chris just sat there, hands clenched and pulse erratic, mind turning over memories he hadn't thought of in years. Sienna. That summer hot, too many hours spent in half-empty bars and cheap hotels, her laughter carrying over clinking glasses and bad music. It hadn't been serious. Wasn't supposed to be, anyway. He'd been on the brink of a merger, phone buzzing every few minutes, but she hadn't cared. It had been a relief, at the time, someone who didn't want anything from him. Or so he thought. Then the call stopped. No warning, no explanation. His assistant had found a note on his desk, 3 lines scribbled hastily, saying goodbye without really saying it. He'd buried himself in work, mergers and acquisitions stacking high enough to drown out the ache. Except now he knew why she'd disappeared. A knock cut through the silence. Sam stuck her head in, brows raised. "You look like you've seen a ghost," she remarked, eyeing him warily. "Close enough," Chris muttered, shoving the paper aside. "Get the car. I need to dash." He paused, scrubbing a hand over his face. "I need to fix this." Sam's eyes flicked to the paper and back, understanding softening her usual sharp edges. She didn't ask questions, just nodded and slipped out. By the time Chris pulled up to the hospital, dusk was falling, casting long shadows over the parking lot. He took the stairs two at a time, barely registering the receptionist's startled look as he strode past. Sienna was by the window when he pushed the door open. She turned at the sound, eyes narrowing when she saw him. Her arms were crossed, defensive and closed off, but her shoulders sagged with exhaustion. "Back already?" she asked, voice flat. "What, didn't find enough evidence to sue us yet?" Chris shut the door a little too hard, the click sharp in the quiet room. "You knew," he snapped. "You knew all this time and didn't bother to tell me." Sienna's eyes flashed. "You think I didn't try?" she shot back, tone icy. "Your lawyers wouldn't let me past the lobby. I sent letters. Emails. They all bounced back." He scoffed, but it came out shakier than intended. "You could have tried harder." Sienna let out a harsh laugh, no humor in it. "Right. Because I had time to play phone tag with your army of suits while raising a kid alone and working 2 jobs. Chris flinched, throat tight. He opened his mouth, some retort teetering on the tip of his tongue, but a soft whimper from the bed silenced them both. Sienna moved instinctively, hands smoothing over Liam's hair. Chris followed, steps faltering when he caught sight of the monitor's numbers flashing, tubes winding from Liam's arms, too many machines for one small boy. His stomach twisted painfully. "You could have tried harder," Sienna repeated quietly, not looking at him this time. Her hand trembled slightly where it rested against Liam's blanket. "You really think I wanted this? That I wanted to do it alone?" Chris swallowed, guilt settling heavy and unrelenting. He shifted his weight, hands clenching and unclenching at his sides. "I didn't know," he said, voice strained. It sounded weak even to him. Sienna snorted softly. "Yeah. I figured." The door creaked open before he could reply, a doctor stepping in with a clipboard in hand. Her eyes flicked between them, hesitating. "Sorry," she murmured. There's been some developments." Sienna's shoulders went rigid. "What do you mean?" The doctor sighed, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "Liam's condition is deteriorating faster than we anticipated. The first surgery helped stabilize him, but he'll need another soon." She hesitated, glancing at Chris. "Without it." Sienna's breath hitched, her hand tightening over Liam's. Chris's jaw clenched, the doctor's words sinking in, cold and heavy. "I'll pay," he said immediately, voice hard. "Whatever it costs." Sienna's eyes snapped to him, startled and suspicious. "You what?" "Money's not the issue," Chris bit out, gaze fixed on Liam's too-still form. "Just get it done." The doctor nodded, relief flickering across her face. "We'll schedule it right away." When the door swung shut again, Sienna turned to him, anger simmering beneath the surface. "You can't just throw money at this," she hissed. "What else am I supposed to do?" Chris shot back, voice rising. "I can't dash." He stopped short, words catching. "I can't lose him." Sienna's eyes softened, just a fraction. Chris scrubbed a hand over his face, dragging in a breath that felt too shallow. "Just let me help," he mumbled, voice rough. "Please." Sienna hesitated, conflict plain in the tight line of her mouth. But Liam stirred again, face pinching, and she slumped with a resigned sigh. "Fine," she muttered. "But this doesn't mean I trust you." "Wouldn't expect you to," Chris replied, shoulders easing despite himself. They fell into silence, broken only by the soft beeps of monitors and Liam's uneven breaths. Chris watched, tension ebbing with each rise and fall of Liam's chest, guilt gnawing steadily beneath his ribs. For the first time in years, his mind was quiet. No mergers, no stock reports, no board meetings, just a too small hospital bed and the boy fighting to breathe. Chris's gaze drifted to Sienna, hands still protectively curled around Liam's. Something twisted painfully in his chest, and he exhaled slowly, fists unclenching. If nothing else, he was going to fix this. Even if it took every cent he had. Chris leaned against the wall outside Liam's hospital room, fingers drumming a restless rhythm. The past few days blurred together, doctors, test results, Sienna's glare sharpening every time he spoke. The surgery was scheduled, but the wait stretched endlessly, leaving him twitchy and irritable. Sienna had refused, at first. Flat out, eyes narrowed, mouth a tight line. She'd crossed her arms when he suggested it, shaking her head before he even finished the sentence. "It's safer," Chris argued, trying for reasonable and landing closer to desperate. "Closer to the hospital, more space, better security. The press is already sniffing around, and you don't need reporters camping outside your apartment." Sienna snorted. "And moving into your castle fixes that?" He pinched the bridge of his nose, inhaling slowly. "Estate," he corrected dryly. "Not a castle." She rolled her eyes. "Same difference." But when Liam woke up, pale and tired but curious, asking if Chris had a pool, Sienna's protests faltered. His eyes brightened at the mention of a game room, flicking to Sienna with a hopeful look that left her sighing in defeat. "Fine," she muttered, pinching the bridge of her nose. "But just until the surgery." Chris hid a smile, clearing his throat. "Whatever you say." A day later, Sienna stood in the marble-floored foyer, eyes wide and mouth half open. Liam clutched his teddy bear, gaze swinging between the chandelier and the grand staircase like he couldn't decide what to stare at first. "This isn't a house," Sienna said flatly. "It's a museum." Chris arched a brow. "You're welcome." She shot him a look that could have withered plants. "I didn't say thank you." "Noticed," he muttered, lips twitching. Liam's hand tightened on Sienna's sleeve. "Do we really get to stay here?" he whispered, voice small. Chris's chest ached. "For as long as you need," he promised, trying to keep his tone light. Liam's eyes shone, and Chris swallowed, guilt clawing at his throat. They settled in slowly. Sienna was skittish, flinching whenever a maid appeared to offer towels or snacks, muttering apologies and trying to carry her own bags. Liam, on the other hand, lit up at the indoor pool, giggling when Chris, who hadn't brought a change of clothes, ended up waist-deep, suit pants soaking and dignity nowhere to be found. Sienna snorted behind her hand, eyes crinkling at the edges. Chris huffed, pretending not to see her smirk. The game room was another hit. Liam's face glowed under the neon lights of the arcade machines, fingers mashing buttons with single-minded determination. Chris tried to explain chess, moving pieces slowly, only to be checkmated twice in 10 minutes. "Did you let him win?" Sienna asked, leaning against the doorway. Chris sighed. "I wish." She snorted. "Maybe stick to Monopoly." They were still figuring each other out, conversation stilted and cautious. Sienna kept her distance, eyes wary, shoulders stiff. But sometimes, like when Chris set a plate of pancakes in front of Liam, burnt edges, uneven stack, but edible, her expression softened. Just for a second. Breakfast was a disaster. Chris misjudged the stovetop settings, nearly set the kitchen on fire, and spent 10 minutes waving a dish towel under the smoke detector, cursing softly while Sienna snickered into her coffee. "You run a billion-dollar company," she teased. "How do you not know how to make toast?" "Delegation," he grumbled, scraping charred bits into the trash. "Clearly I need a staff meeting just for kitchen appliances." Sienna snorted into her cup, and Liam giggled, syrup clinging to his fingers and cheeks flushed. Small moments, brief and fleeting, but they built steadily. Chris found himself reading bedtime stories, stumbling over character voices while Liam giggled under the blankets, eyes bright with amusement. Sienna leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed but mouth twitching at the edges. Liam's room was down the hall, soft blue walls, star-shaped lights on the ceiling. Chris hadn't planned to stay, but Liam's hand curled around his sleeve, tugging weakly, and his eyes were so tired. "Just one more chapter," Liam mumbled, words slurring sleepily. Chris cleared his throat. "Fine," he muttered, softening. Liam's eyes fluttered, but he smiled, snuggling deeper into the blankets. Chris's voice smoothed out, words steadying, the room quiet except for the soft hum of the monitors. By the time he closed the book, Liam was out cold, breathing slow and even. Chris hesitated, gaze flicking to Sienna, who hadn't moved from the door. Her arms were still crossed, but her eyes had softened. "Didn't know you were such a storyteller," she murmured. "Business negotiations," Chris deadpanned. "Same difference." She huffed, but the tension around her shoulders eased. For a moment, just a moment, the walls cracked. They slipped back into place a breath later, but Chris couldn't shake the way her eyes had softened. He slipped out of the room quietly, Sienna trailing a step behind. In the hallway, she hesitated, fingers twisting the hem of her sleeve. "He really likes you," she admitted, voice barely above a whisper. He doesn't usually warm up to people that fast." Chris's chest tightened. "He's a good kid." Sienna's mouth twitched, but her eyes dropped, shadowed with exhaustion. "I know." They stood in silence, too much unsaid, words catching and stalling. Chris's fingers twitched at his sides, but he didn't reach out. Couldn't. Not yet. His phone buzzed, shattering the quiet. He dug it out, glancing at the caller ID. The board. The number flashed insistently, refusing to be ignored. Sienna arched a brow. "Work?" "Unfortunately," Chris muttered, jaw tightening. "Go on to bed. I'll handle it." She hesitated, eyes flicking between him and the phone, and for a moment, he thought she might say something. But she only nodded, slipping down the hall without another word. Chris exhaled, dragging a hand over his face, and swiped to answer. "Callahan," he said, keeping his voice low. "Sir?" came the clipped response. "We've got a problem. The press is asking questions. About you. And a kid." Chris's breath stilled, fingers clenching tight around the phone. "It's only a matter of time." The voice continued, tone flat. "We need a statement before this blows up." Chris's jaw tightened, pulse pounding in his ears. The hallway felt smaller, air too thick and walls too close. "Handle it," he bit out, voice cold. "Whatever it takes." "Yes, sir," the voice replied, line clicking dead. Chris stared at the darkened screen, chest tight, mind already spinning. He glanced down the hall, where Liam's door was cracked just enough to let a sliver of warm light spill out. Whatever it takes. Chris knew things had gone south the moment he stepped into his office. Sam was pacing, phone glued to her ear, voice tight and clipped. His PR manager hovered nearby, fingers drumming nervously against a stack of papers, eyes darting to the door every few seconds. The TV in the corner flickered with headlines, the words bold and unmissable. Photos flashed grainy but clear enough of Chris holding Liam's hand outside the hospital, Sienna standing nearby, her face turned away. "Billionaire's secret son," one headline screamed, letters in red, aggressive and loud. "Love child scandal rocks Callahan Industries," proclaimed another. Chris's stomach twisted. He barely registered Sam hanging up, her eyes fixed on him with something that looked a lot like pity. "How bad is it?" he asked, voice low and even. "Bad," Sam replied flatly. "Every network's running it. Your inbox is full of interview requests. Shareholders are panicking. PR's got half a dozen drafts for a statement, but none of them." She hesitated, grimacing. "None of them help." Chris dragged a hand over his face, the ache behind his eyes dull and relentless. "Great," he muttered. "Just what I needed." Sam hesitated. "Sienna's phone's been blowing up," she added, tone cautious. So has yours. She tried to call. Twice. Chris swore under his breath, already reaching for his phone. 2 missed calls and a text, all from Sienna. No voicemail. His fingers hovered for a beat before he tapped the screen, holding his breath. It barely rang once. Are you kidding me? Sienna's voice cut through, sharp and furious. No greeting, no pause. What did you do? Chris flinched. I didn't save it. She snapped. I saw the photos. Reporters are camped outside Liam's hospital room. Nurses can't even get in without cameras flashing. This Her voice cracked, and she exhaled sharply. You promised this wouldn't happen. I didn't call them. Chris bit out, forcing his voice to stay steady. I'm handling it. Handling it? Sienna's laugh was brittle. Is that what you call this? Because it sure looks like you sold us out. He gripped the phone tighter, teeth grinding. I would never don't. She hissed. Just don't. Liam's terrified, and it's your fault. Fix it. The line clicked dead. Chris pulled the phone away, staring at the blank screen with a mixture of disbelief and something that burned low in his chest. Sir? Sam's voice was quiet, cautious. What do you want us to do? Chris closed his eyes for half a second, jaw tight. Get them out, he muttered. Reporters, cameras, everyone. I want them gone. And the statement? Scrap it, he snapped. I'm not throwing them to the wolves to save face. Sam nodded, already typing, voice soft. Got it. By the time Chris made it back to the estate, his phone hadn't stopped buzzing once. He ignored it, stride brisk and shoulders tight, cursing under his breath when he saw the gate paparazzi lined up outside, cameras flashing wildly as he pulled through. Security kept them at bay, but questions rang out anyway, muffled through the glass. Is he really your son? Is this why Sienna Parker disappeared? Does your board know Chris clenched the wheel, pulse pounding. He barely waited for the car to stop before he was out, slamming the door behind him and striding inside. The kitchen was empty, lights off. He cursed, moving faster, shoes echoing down the hall until he reached Liam's room. The door was ajar, voices muffled inside Sienna's, soft and frayed, Liam's weaker, hiccuping through words. He stopped short at the sight. Sienna was sitting on the edge of the bed, one arm wrapped around Liam's shoulders, his face buried in her chest, shoulders shaking. Her free hand brushed through his hair, gentle but unsteady. Chris's chest tightened painfully. Sienna, he managed, voice rough. She looked up sharply, eyes red-rimmed and furious. You have a lot of nerve showing your face, she snapped. Chris flinched. It wasn't don't. She bit out, voice raw. Just don't. I warned you, didn't I? I said no press, no cameras, but you just couldn't help yourself. He took a slow breath. I didn't call them, he said quietly. I swear. Sienna's jaw tightened, eyes flicking to Liam and back. Doesn't matter, she muttered. Damage is done. Chris's gaze drifted to Liam, still hiccuping softly, fists clenched in Sienna's shirt. Guilt twisted sharp and relentless. He took a slow step forward. Liam don't. Sienna snapped, voice breaking. You don't get to play the hero now. His fists clenched at his sides. I'm trying to fix it. Sienna snorted, but the sound cracked. Well, you failed. Chris's breath stuttered. Please, he managed, voice low. Just let me explain. Sienna's glare faltered, mouth pressing into a thin line. There's nothing to explain, she muttered, but her tone lacked heat. She shifted, trying to pull Liam to his feet, but he let out a soft whimper, fingers clinging tighter. Chris's chest twisted. Where he swallowed. Where are you going? Somewhere that doesn't have cameras parked outside. Sienna bit out, hauling a bag over her shoulder. I can't do this. I won't. Panic flared, sharp and blinding. Wait, just Chris reached out instinctively, hand catching her wrist. She froze, eyes flashing with warning. "Sienna, please," he rasped. "Don't go. Not yet. I can fix this, I promise." She stared at him, eyes glistening, mouth trembling just slightly. "You can't," she whispered. "Not this time." But she didn't pull away, and Chris's grip tightened, voice cracking. I can't lose him," he mumbled, the words slipping out before he could stop them. "I can't lose you." Sienna's breath hitched. For a heartbeat, everything hung in the balance, her eyes wide and glassy, Liam's hiccups slowing, Chris's hand still warm around her wrist. Then she exhaled shakily, shoulders slumping. "This doesn't change anything," she muttered, voice tired and hoarse. "I'm only staying until the surgery. After that dash." Chris nodded quickly, chest easing just enough to breathe. "Anything," he promised. "As long as you stay." Sienna looked away, biting her lip, hand falling limp in his grasp. "Just no more cameras," she whispered. "I swear," he replied, voice raw. "No more cameras." She hesitated, then sighed, shoulders dropping. "Fine," she muttered. "But you're sleeping on the couch." Chris's lips twitched, something like relief flooding through the cracks. "Wouldn't dream of it," he said, voice unsteady but lighter. Sienna snorted softly, rolling her eyes. But her grip on Liam eased, fingers brushing his hair, and for the first time since he'd walked in, the tension in the room lessened. Chris released her wrist slowly, chest tight but a fraction lighter, and exhaled. Maybe it wasn't much, but it was a start. The days leading up to the surgery blurred into a chaotic mess of hospital visits, late-night phone calls, and board meetings Chris barely remembered. His phone buzzed constantly, shareholders demanding statements, reporters pressing for comments. Every time a number flashed, his chest tightened, but he couldn't bring himself to silence it. Sam handled what she could, voice brisk and efficient, but there was only so much she could do. Chris's focus wavered, always snapping back to Liam's hospital room, the steady beep of monitors, the antiseptic sting in the air, Sienna's exhausted eyes. He spent more time there than at the office, despite the way his schedule screamed otherwise. Reports piled up, emails went unanswered. He knew his CFO was furious, but every time he considered leaving, Liam's tired smile flashed behind his eyes and his feet refused to move. Most nights, he didn't bother going home. The hospital chair pulled out into a stiff, uncomfortable bed, and Chris fell asleep fully dressed, tie skewed and jacket wrinkled. He woke with a crick in his neck and Sienna's exasperated glare, her mouth twitching despite herself. "You look like you lost a fight," she muttered one morning, eyes flicking to his askew tie. "Feels like it," Chris grumbled, rubbing at his neck. She rolled her eyes but handed him a cup of hospital coffee, steam curling lazily. He hesitated, then took it with a mumbled thanks, ignoring her smirk. It was lukewarm and bitter, but it woke him up enough to manage a board meeting through gritted teeth. Liam was too quiet, too pale, but his eyes brightened when Chris walked in, a small hand lifting weakly. Chris's chest squeezed tight, guilt coiling and unrelenting. "You came back," Liam mumbled one evening, blinking sleepily. Chris swallowed hard, forcing a smile. "Told you I would, didn't I?" Liam's eyes fluttered, a small smile curving his mouth. "Mom says you're supposed to be working," Chris snorted. "She says a lot of things." Sienna's voice floated from the doorway. "And I mean every one of them," she remarked dryly. Liam giggled, the sound soft and scratchy. Chris chuckled, glancing over at Sienna, who tried to glare but failed miserably. The tension in his shoulders eased, just a fraction. When Liam had drifted off, Sienna sank into the chair beside the bed, eyes heavy-lidded and shoulders slumped. Chris leaned against the wall, fingers drumming aimlessly. "They need you at the office," Sienna murmured eventually, eyes half closed. "They can wait," Chris replied, tone dismissive. She huffed softly. "Bet they love that. They'll live," he muttered, and Sienna snorted, lips twitching. There were moments like that, small and unguarded, walls cracked just enough to see through. Moments where Sienna's shoulders softened, where Liam's laughter rang out bright and free. They never lasted long, but Chris held on to them, tucked them away for the quieter hours when the machines beat and Sienna's eyes were rimmed red. One afternoon, Liam convinced him to play superhero's soft blue blanket tied around Chris's shoulders, a makeshift cape that dragged the floor. Sienna caught them in the middle of a dramatic rescue mission, Chris crawling on all fours with Liam astride, plastic sword held high. She burst out laughing, the sound startled and unfiltered, echoing down the hall. Chris froze, cape tangled around his legs, cheeks warm. "You're Dash," she wheezed, one hand pressed to her mouth. "You're really committed to the bit." Chris rolled his eyes. "He's the boss," he grumbled, but couldn't help the way his mouth twitched. Sienna's laughter died down, but her eyes stayed bright, lips curved. For a moment, the world narrowed to that tiny hospital room. Liam's giggles, Sienna's soft gaze, the ache in Chris's chest dulling just a little. That night, long after Liam had fallen asleep, Chris found Sienna in the waiting room, head tilted back against the wall, eyes closed but not quite asleep. He hesitated, then sank into the chair beside her, fingers lacing tightly in his lap. The silence stretched, soft and heavy, before Sienna sighed, eyes flicking open. "I used to wonder," she murmured, voice barely a whisper. "If you knew. If you even cared." Chris's jaw clenched. "I didn't," he said roughly. "Not because I didn't want to, I didn't know." She let out a hollow laugh. "Your lawyers made sure of that." His fingers curled tighter. "If I had Dash," his voice cracked, throat tight. "If I'd known, I wouldn't have left. You have to believe that." Sienna's eyes softened, but she shook her head, gaze dropping. "I tried to hate you," she admitted, voice raw. "For leaving. For everything. But I couldn't. Not really." Chris's breath stilled, chest aching. "Sienna Dash, don't," she whispered, shaking her head, voice trembling. "Not now." He swallowed hard, words catching. They fell into silence again, the weight between them thick and unspoken, the world narrowed to beeping monitors and hushed whispers. When the surgery day came, Chris's hands wouldn't stop shaking. Liam smiled weakly from the gurney, fingers twitching in a small wave. Sienna's hand was warm in his, gripped tight enough to ache. "It's gonna be fine," Chris rasped, the words tripping over themselves. He's strong." Sienna's smile was paper-thin. "I know." They watched until the doors swung shut behind Liam, the hallway suddenly too quiet, too cold. Sienna's breath hitched, shoulders curling inward. Chris didn't think, just reached out, arms wrapping tight, Sienna's face pressed to his chest. Her fingers clutched his shirt, breaths ragged and uneven. Chris held on, jaw clenched, eyes squeezed shut. Minutes stretched into hours, doctors rushing past, voices muffled, the clock ticking steadily. Chris's legs ached, but he didn't move, didn't dare let go. Sienna's breath slowed, but her grip stayed tight, like letting go might make it real. The waiting room door creaked open, a nurse stepping in, eyes somber. Chris's pulse stuttered, every nerve drawn tight. "There was a complication," she said gently, voice careful. His heart he coded on the table. "They're doing everything they can, but Dash." The ground swayed, vision darkening at the edges. Sienna's knees buckled, her weight collapsing into him, fingers twisting tight. Chris's arms wrapped around her instinctively, breath hitched, chest tight enough to split. The nurse's voice faded to a dull buzz, drowned out by the pounding in his ears, Sienna's broken sobs muffled against his chest. Chris's eyes squeezed shut, throat raw, hands trembling as he held on. Time stretched painfully, each second a lead weight dragging Chris's breath short and shallow. The waiting room was too quiet, every tick of the clock loud and grating. Sienna sat beside him, face buried in her hands, shoulders trembling despite how tightly she held herself together. Chris's knee bounced restlessly, hands twisted together until his knuckles ached. He hadn't let go of Sienna's hand since they'd led Liam away, fingers numb where hers clutched tight. The memory of the nurse's words he quoted on the table echoed dully, clawing at his chest with every breath. He scrubbed a hand over his face, dragging in air that barely reached his lungs. For the first time in years, he had no plan, no contingency, nothing but that small hospital bed and the thought of Liam's eyes fluttering closed, too pale, too small. Sienna shifted, a broken breath slipping free, and Chris's grip tightened instinctively, a desperate anchor. "He's Dash." His voice cracked, raw and unsteady. "He's strong. He's gonna pull through." Sienna's fingers spasmed around his, nails biting in. She didn't answer, but her head tilted minutely, pressing closer, breath shuddering and uneven. Chris swallowed hard, throat tight and aching. The door creaked open eventually, the sound jarring in the silence. Chris's head snapped up, eyes wild and tired, hands clenched until his fingers went numb. Dr. Grant stepped in, mask pulled down, tired eyes softening when they landed on Chris. Lines had deepened around his mouth since the last time they'd spoken, streaks of gray threading through dark hair. Chris stood abruptly, legs nearly giving out beneath him. "Grant," he rasped, voice splintering. Grant exhaled softly. "It was close," he said, voice grave but gentle. "Too close. But he's stable for now." The words slammed into Chris's chest, leaving him swaying, breath rushing out all at once. His knees buckled, and he sank back into the chair, hands still locked around Sienna's, grip too tight, too desperate. Sienna let out a noise halfway between a sob and a gasp, shoulders slumping forward. Her hand flew to her mouth, eyes glistening, breaths coming fast and uneven. Chris's fingers slid up instinctively, curling around her wrist, thumb brushing faint circles over the delicate skin there. "But," Grant continued, voice careful, "he's not out of the woods yet. The next few days will be critical. If his body accepts the grafts, he'll have a shot. But there's a risk of infection, and recovery will be long and uncertain." Sienna's eyes squeezed shut, shoulders curling protectively inward. Chris's grip tightened, pulse thundering in his ears. "Whatever he needs," he bit out, voice rough. "Whatever it takes." Grant's mouth twitched faintly. "I figured," he murmured, eyes glinting with something like amusement. "Like father, like son." Chris huffed weakly, but his voice came out cracked and hoarse. "Save the sentiment," he muttered, but the words lacked bite. Grant chuckled softly, but his eyes stayed warm, flicking briefly to Sienna's trembling form. "He's a fighter," he said gently. "Just like his parents." Chris's chest ached, something raw and unsteady unraveling in the pit of his stomach. His hand didn't leave Sienna's, thumb still brushing faintly, breaths coming just a little easier. "He's gonna be okay," he whispered, more to himself than anyone. "He's gonna be okay." Sienna's breath hitched, fingers squeezing back, and for a moment, the weight on Chris's chest eased, just a fraction. They stayed that way for what felt like hours, hands locked together, breaths uneven but steadying. Eventually, a nurse poked her head in, voice soft and careful, guiding them through dim halls and antiseptic-laced corridors until they reached the recovery room. Liam was small and still, tubes snaking from his arms, monitors blinking softly beside the bed. Chris's steps faltered, heart stuttering painfully at the sight. Sienna rushed forward, one hand flying to Liam's cheek, fingers trembling but gentle. Chris stood back, hands shoved into his pockets to hide the way they shook. He dragged in a breath, forced his legs to move, and settled into the chair beside the bed, eyes never leaving the steady rise and fall of Liam's chest. Sienna's shoulders slumped, a broken sob slipping free, forehead pressing to the bed's edge. Chris reached out, instinct overriding hesitation, one hand settling between her shoulder blades, thumb brushing softly. She leaned into the touch, fingers tangling in the sheets, breaths hitching. "We're here," Chris murmured, voice soft and unsteady. "We're right here." Sienna's fingers curled tighter, and Chris's throat tightened painfully, eyes burning. They stayed like that, breaths sinking slow and steady, the weight of the past few days ebbing away with each soft beep of the monitors. Chris's head drooped eventually, exhaustion dragging his eyes closed, chin resting against the edge of the bed, Sienna's shoulder warm against his own. When Liam stirred, hours later, small fingers twitching weakly, Chris jolted awake, pulse hammering. Liam's eyes cracked open, unfocused at first, then softening when they landed on Chris. His lips parted, voice a scratchy whisper. You stay, he rasped, words slow and slurred. Chris's breath itched, fingers curling tight around the edge of the bed. Course I did, he managed, voice raw. I'm not going anywhere. Liam's eyes fluttered, a faint smile tugging at the corners of his mouth, eyelids drooping with exhaustion. Sienna's hand crept over Chris's, fingers lacing through his own, grip warm and steady. Chris's chest ached, but for the first time in weeks, his breaths came easy, shoulders relaxing into the chair. When they brought Liam home days later, pale and tired but breathing steady, the house was warm and bright, sunlight spilling through the windows. Drawings lined the hallway, crayon and markers scrawled over sheets of paper, Liam's shaky handwriting labeling each one. One drawing stopped Chris in his tracks, 3 stick figures holding hands, a heart scrawled above them, Liam's name written in the corner. Sienna let out a soft breath behind him, one hand coming to rest on his back, her cheek pressed to his shoulder. Chris's throat burned, eyes misting before he huffed a soft laugh, scrubbing a hand over his face. Sienna's lips twitched. Sentimental, she teased, voice warm. Shut up, Chris muttered, voice thick, but his hand covered hers, grip soft but steady. They settled into a quiet routine, soft mornings, Liam's giggles echoing down the halls, Sienna's hand brushing his in the kitchen, smiles small but real. One evening, after Liam had fallen asleep, Sienna leaned against the counter, eyes soft and tired but clear. Chris hesitated, fingers twisting the edge of a dish towel, breaths uneven. Stay, Sienna whispered, voice trembling but certain. Not just for Liam. For us. Chris's breath caught, fingers freezing, eyes snapping to hers. Sienna's gaze didn't waver, lips trembling faintly, eyes glistening. He exhaled slowly, chest light and unsteady, and took a slow step forward, hands cradling her face, forehead pressing to hers. Always, he rasped, voice cracked but sure. Sienna's breath itched, lips curving softly, eyes fluttering closed. Chris's hands slid to her waist, thumbs brushing slow, breaths mingling, the ache in his chest easing with every steady beat of Liam's heart down the hall. Sunlight spilled through the hallway windows, warm and golden, stretching long shadows across the hardwood. Laughter echoed down the corridor, high and bright and free. Chris stumbled back a step, the remote-controlled car zipping past his feet with a near miss, plastic wheels skidding. Liam's giggles followed, bright eyes alight with mischief, tiny hands clutching the remote with single-minded determination. Slow down, Chris protested, but the words came out half laugh, half gasp as he sidestepped too late and nearly tripped over the rug. I thought you were supposed to be recovering. Liam grinned wide, no hint of guilt in sight. You're just slow, he called back, cheeks flushed and eyes bright. Traitor, Chris muttered, but the smile tugging at his mouth ruined the effect. He scooped up the remote as Liam zoomed past, catching the boy around the waist and hoisting him into the air with a soft huff. Liam squealed, hands batting playfully, giggles bubbling over. Sienna leaned in the doorway, arms crossed but eyes warm, lips twitching with amusement. The ring on her finger glinted faintly in the sunlight, simple but elegant, a soft sapphire set in silver. She caught Chris's eye, smile growing, and arched a brow. Ganging up on me already? Chris asked, breathless but grinning. Sienna smirked. He's got a point, she drawled, voice light. You're not exactly nimble. Chris snorted, adjusting Liam against his hip with a dramatic sigh. You're both fired, he declared, voice dry. Liam's eyes went wide. Can't fire us, he mumbled, grin cheeky. Mom's the boss. Chris huffed, glancing at Sienna with a half-smile. Don't I know it? He muttered, earning a snort from Sienna and another giggle from Liam. They moved to the kitchen eventually, Liam still clinging to Chris's back, fingers tangled in his shirt. Chris tugged at the collar absently, mindlessly adjusting it while Sienna set out sandwiches, brushing hair from her face with the back of her hand. It felt natural, almost domestic, in a way Chris hadn't thought he'd ever have. Laughter threading through sunlit mornings, Sienna's fingers brushing his as she passed a plate, Liam's giggles bright and easy. His phone buzzed faintly on the counter, screen lighting up with a dozen missed calls and emails, but Chris silenced it without a glance, eyes fixed on Sienna and Liam, chest warm and steady. They had time. The boardroom was colder than usual, even with sunlight spilling in through the glass walls, but Chris barely noticed, hands clasped in front of him, expression steady. The board members shifted uneasily, eyes darting between each other and the papers spread out across the table: resignation letters, financial reports, projections. Whispers curled at the edges of the room, disbelief and confusion thick in the air. Sam stood off to the side, hands folded tightly, eyes wide and fixed on Chris like she couldn't quite believe what she was hearing. "This isn't Dash." One of the board members cleared his throat, pushing his glasses up his nose. "Chris, are you sure about this?" "Positive," Chris replied, tone even. "Sam's more than capable. She knows the company better than anyone. You'll be in good hands." Sam's mouth parted faintly, fingers twitching. "Sir Dash." Chris's eyes flicked to her, mouth softening. "You've earned it," he said quietly. "About time you stopped babysitting me and ran the place yourself." Sam stared for a full 5 seconds, blinking rapidly. "But I Dash." She floundered, cheeks darkening faintly. "I nearly spilled coffee on a senator last month." Chris's lips twitched. "You'll do fine," he deadpanned. Sam spluttered, eyes narrowed. "You're unbelievable," she muttered, voice faint but warm, and Chris huffed a soft laugh, shoulders easing. The meeting wrapped up eventually, papers signed and hands shaken, murmurs still echoing behind him as Chris stepped into the elevator, exhaling slowly. His phone buzzed again, but this time, it was a picture Liam with a crayon-scribbled card that read "Come home soon," a lopsided heart doodled in the corner. Sienna's message followed, simple and soft. "Dinner's at 6. Don't be late." Chris chuckled, thumb brushing over the screen, and hit reply. "Wouldn't miss it." The foundation took weeks to set up meetings with lawyers, paperwork piled high, donors to contact and press statements to write. Chris barely blinked at the costs, funding flowing in under Sienna's name, soft blue and silver flyers printed with her signature. Sienna stared at the first draft, fingers brushing the edge, eyes misty but soft. Chris cleared his throat, shifting awkwardly, hands shoved into his pockets. "I thought Dash." He faltered, voice rough, then huffed. "It was your idea." Sienna's eyes flicked up, glistening faintly. "You're impossible," she muttered, voice trembling but warm. Chris's mouth twitched. "So I've heard." Her fingers tightened on the flyer, shoulders curling in, and for a moment, Chris thought she might cry. But she sniffed sharply, huffing, and elbowed him lightly, eyes rolling. He snorted, bumping her back, and didn't pull away when her hands slipped into his, fingers lacing warm and steady. The gala was loud and bright, chandeliers casting soft, golden light over polished floors. Chris tugged at his tie absently, gaze flicking through the crowd, shoulders tight. Liam was the first to spot him, eyes lighting up, fingers tugging insistently at Sienna's sleeve. She chuckled softly, hands sliding down to rest on Liam's shoulder, eyes warm. Chris barely got a step forward before Liam barreled into him, small arms wrapping tight around his waist, nose burying into his suit jacket. Chris's breath hitched, arms closing instinctively, heart stuttering at the warmth and weight. "You're here," Liam mumbled, words muffled but sure. "Course I am," Chris rasped, voice cracked. "I promised, didn't I?" Liam pulled back, eyes wide and earnest. Can I tell them?" he asked hesitantly, fingers twisting in Chris's sleeve. Chris blinked, breath catching. "Tell them what, buddy?" Liam's cheeks flushed faintly, fingers tightening. "That you're my dad." Chris's heart stuttered painfully, eyes misting despite himself. His mouth opened, words catching, breath unsteady. Yeah, he managed, voice cracked and raw. You can tell them. Liam's eyes brightened, and he beamed, cheeks dimpling, small hands slipping into Chris's, fingers warm and sure. That night, long after the gala ended and the house quieted, Chris settled on the edge of Liam's bed, the room lit soft and golden by the nightlight. Liam's eyes fluttered, drowsy and heavy, small hand clutching the blanket. Chris smoothed a hand over his hair, breath easing slowly, chest light and unsteady. I'm not going anywhere, he whispered, voice rough but steady. I promise. Liam's eyes cracked open, a soft smile curling his mouth, words slurred but sure. I know, Dad, he mumbled, eyes fluttering closed again, breath evening out. Chris's chest ached, eyes misting faintly, but he huffed a soft laugh, thumb brushing Liam's cheek. He leaned back, eyes softening, and stayed long after Liam drifted off, breath slow and steady, the ache in his chest easing with every beat of Liam's small heart. Years slipped by in a blur of soft mornings and laughter that echoed down sunlit halls. The estate transformed rooms once empty now cluttered with toys and crayon drawings, the garden trampled by small feet, soccer balls left forgotten in the grass. The walls were lined with family photos, Liam at 6, toothy grin and fingers sticky with cake. Liam at 10, clutching a baseball mitt too big for his hand, eyes bright with excitement. Sienna and Chris, smiles easy and eyes soft, hands laced together. Liam turned 12 that summer, taller and gangly but still clutching the same old teddy bear on bad days, its ear mended a half dozen times. His hair was lighter in the sun, cheeks dusted with freckles, eyes bright and unburdened. The scars faded slowly, pale and thin across his chest, reminders of hospital rooms and beeping monitors, of nights Chris spent pacing and praying to anything that might listen. But Liam wore them unashamed, grinning wide and bright, voice loud and unbothered. Chris had retired a year ago, the board finally giving up after months of negotiations and offers. Sam ran the company, now efficient and no-nonsense, though she texted often enough, updates phrased dryly but with enough snark to make Chris chuckle. The house felt warmer without conference calls and urgent emails, without deadlines and paperwork piling high. It felt like home-like Sunday breakfasts with Sienna stealing sips of his coffee and Liam's sleepy giggles drifting from the kitchen. Sienna's foundation thrived, offices bustling with calls and stacks of donations, letters from parents scrawled with grateful words. Chris kept his involvement quiet, content to work in the background, spreadsheets and figures, contracts and agreements. Sienna teased him endlessly, eyes warm, mouth twitching, but her kisses were softer than her words, fingers brushing through his hair in gentle, absent touches. The backyard was warm that afternoon, sunlight spilling gold across the grass, leaves rustling soft and steady. Chris leaned back in one of the deck chairs, sunglasses low on his nose, a book open but forgotten in his lap. Sienna stretched out beside him, fingers laced with his, eyes half closed, shoulders sun-warm and relaxed. Liam's voice carried from the other side of the yard, bright and excited, words tripping over themselves in a rush of laughter. A few of his friends darted past, sneakers scuffing the grass, water guns in hand, shouts and shrieks echoing. Chris watched with a fond smile, fingers brushing absently over the back of Sienna's hand, thumb tracing slow circles. Sienna's lips twitched, eyes cracking open to catch his gaze, mouth quirking. Your son's an instigator, Chris muttered, eyes flicking back to where Liam was sneaking behind one of the bushes, grin wide and devious. Sienna snorted. Our son, she corrected, bumping his shoulder lightly. And he gets that from you. Chris huffed. I resent that. Sienna rolled her eyes, but her smile softened, fingers squeezing his. Chris chuckled, leaning over to press a kiss to her temple, eyes glinting. A shout split the air, Liam barreling toward them, feet pounding and hair wild, cheeks flushed with laughter. He skidded to a stop in front of the chairs, breathless but grinning, eyes bright. Dad! Mom! He panted, leaning over, hands braced on his knees. You gotta hide me, they've got the big one. Sienna arched a brow, lips twitching. The big one? Liam's eyes widened, nodding frantically. Like super big. Please? Chris chuckled, ruffling Liam's hair. You got yourself into this mess. He deadpanned. No way out now. Liam pouted, lower lip jutting out, eyes wide and pleading. Dad. Chris's mouth twitched, eyes softening. Fine. He sighed, standing with a mock grumble. But you owe me. Liam beamed, hands latching onto his sleeve, tugging insistently. Sienna snorted, settling back with an amused shake of her head, eyes glinting. They barely made it 3 steps before a barrage of water struck, cold and sudden, soaking Chris's shirt and leaving Liam shrieking with laughter, stumbling back with arms flailing. One of Liam's friends darted past, grinning wide, water gun clutched victoriously. Chris spluttered, water dripping from his hair, eyes narrowed. Traitor! He muttered, swiping a hand down his face. Liam's giggles bubbled over, eyes scrunched and mouth stretched wide. Chris's glare melted, mouth softening despite himself, chest warm and tight. Sienna watched, eyes fond, lips twitching, fingers brushing absently over the ring on her hand, warm and soft in the sunlight, catching gold and silver and sapphire. Dinner was late and lazy, burgers on the grill, lemonade and sun tea, Liam talking a mile a minute about school and soccer and the summer fair coming up next month. Sienna chuckled softly, elbows braced on the table, chin in her hands, eyes bright and unburdened. Chris's heart ached, full and steady, breaths even and light. That night, long after the sun dipped below the horizon and fireflies blinked lazy and bright, Chris settled into the chair by Liam's bed, the room dark and warm and quiet. Liam blinked sleepily, hair a mess, eyes barely open, one arm wrapped around that same old teddy bear. Chris chuckled, smoothing a hand over Liam's hair, fingers soft and steady. Thought you said you were too old for that thing. He teased gently. Liam huffed, eyes fluttering. Shut up, he mumbled, voice slurred with sleep. It sits for emergencies. Chris's lips twitched. Right, he agreed, voice warm. Emergencies. Liam yawned, eyes drooping, breath slow and steady. Chris's chest ached, fingers brushing light over Liam's temple, thumb tracing faint circles. I'm proud of you, he murmured, voice soft but sure. So proud. Liam's eyes fluttered, mouth curving faintly. Love you, Dad, he mumbled, voice small but sure, eyes slipping closed. Chris's breath hitched, chest tight and eyes burning. His fingers trembled, thumb brushing faintly, breaths uneven. Love you too, he rasped, voice cracking. Always. Liam's breaths evened out, soft and steady, the room quiet and warm. Chris exhaled slowly, chest easing, eyes drifting shut. The night was soft and silent, Sienna's steps light as she moved to lean against the doorframe, eyes soft and lips curved, watching them with a smile that left Chris's heart full and aching. He huffed a soft laugh, fingers lacing with hers when she moved closer, her head settling on his shoulder, breaths evening out. They stayed like that long into the night, breaths sinking slow and steady, hearts light and full. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to leave a like, it really helps out the channel. And if you want more heartwarming and emotional stories like this, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss an upload. Let me know in the comments what you thought of this one, I'd love to hear your reactions. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next story.